The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Amidst economic calamity, a new war in the Middle East, and drama and theatrics in the U.S. Senate, the nation prepares for an historic inauguration.
Against such a momentous backdrop, there's only two people that we need to talk to. Our dynamic duo, Carla Marinucci and Bill Whalen, are here. The game is politics, and the game is on.
I'm Bob Marks.
I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game. We're talking politics. We started before the show started. Carla Marinucci from the Chronicle is here, and Bill Whalen from the Hoover Institution. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
How big is this inauguration? I mean, they're all supposed to be big, but I guess this one really has sort of the ring of history about it, Bill.
That's the old Rodney Dangerfield. Well, how big is my wife? She's big. No, it's huge, and it's here I'm a Republican. I have to admit, it's huge, and it's momentous, and it's going to be a hell of a speech to watch. But then, unfortunately, 40 minutes after he takes the oath of office and gives a speech, he has to govern, and therein the fun begins. And as we've seen, the fun has already begun in the days and weeks leading up to this inaugural, in terms of how he deals with the Congress, how he sells the public exactly on whatever economic quote-unquote stimulus package they come up with, and just how a young man, 47 years old, never been an executive, how he runs this little commodity called the United States of America.
Now before we abandon the glow of the inauguration, we can tell he's a Republican. You were there the night he won the election. You were there in the park and saw that remarkable speech.
That's right.
What is your sense of his ability to deliver what the moment calls for?
Wow, this is going to be the speech, and there's so much riding on it. The bar is so high for him. It's increasingly gone up. The world is going to be watching this speech, and I think it's going to be a moment. I mean, you mentioned how big is it, and for California particularly. Huge number of people going out there. Dianne Feinstein is the chair of the inauguration. There's all kinds of San Francisco Bay Area connections that are going to be up there on the podium with him, and all going to be watching that message that Bill said. Who knows how the speech is going to go, but I think if we've seen how closely he tracks and he's directly involved with these speeches in writing them, I think it's going to be a great speech.
As we look back over the last couple of months and look at the creation, development of this cabinet that he has, Bill, what's your overall reaction? Looking at the cabinet's in place now, what's your overall reaction to the group that he's put together?
Well, if there's a theme to it, it's competency. And that, it's interesting, Obama, unlike any president-elect I can remember in recent history, does not come to Washington with a ready-made entourage of people. Governors come from California, whatever state in America, they bring a handful of people with them. Bush did this when he came to office. Obama did not bring a posse of people with him from Illinois necessarily, so you saw him going around and picking and choosing. Some Clinton people, some from outside the Clinton world, to mixed reviews. But again, competency seems to be the theme here. The one thing they're driving for is they don't want to have somebody in office who 6 months later would say, boy, what a bonehead, this guy clearly cannot do this job. Tom Daschle is a good example of this. Like Hillary Clinton at State is a good example of this, and possibly even Leon Panetta, who I think, by the way, is probably the one surprise pick at CIA.
Carla, isn't, the key to Obama during the campaign was this small, tight-knit group around him that seemed to operate very effectively and really controlled things. Do you think the White House is going to be set up the same way ultimately?
They controlled the press really well during the campaign. Whether that can continue, but it certainly seems through the transition, this is continuing. They've got a very tight operation. That whole email, high-tech operation is going to continue. Obama for America, the political arm, we're watching that go into Obama for America 2.0. They're already fundraising and doing other things and outreaching to people and having contests on who can be at the inauguration. I mean, they're keeping in touch with those constituents. So this is going to be very interesting to watch. And first, the relationship with the press, I think, is really going to be something to watch. There were a lot of complaints that the press was too in the tank for Obama or not tough enough on him. You're seeing some of those stories change now, or I sort of disagree that there was any kind of real difference. But I have to say, the scrutiny is going to be there. You're already starting to see it with some of these picks when you're talking about Richardson, the situation with Burris in Illinois and even the Panetta Feinstein situation.
Not get too inside baseball here, but it's a different set of reporters he's now dealing with. He's been dealing with political reporters like Carla. Now he has to deal with the folks who live in the White House year-round, the fishbowl, as they call it. And they are, if you can believe this, more cynical than the average political reporter. They're in that little closeted area in the White House press operations, and they live for people to mess up. And so while they probably voted for the guy, they want him to succeed. That said, they earn their paycheck by writing about how he's not doing a good job.
The way he picked his cabinet, who he picked, you talked about it, he chose competence. He ran as somebody who wasn't going to be an ideologue. Is that reflected in basically how he's conducted himself up to now, that it's been not non-ideological so much as almost sort of apolitical?
And I think probably with an exclamation point, much to the chagrin of, say, Code Pink, which looks at that selection of cabinet people and can't say there's one of our people in there necessarily. You know, all these various people who had, you know, relations to the Clintons over the years and so forth, very establishment folks. Yeah, I think competency is an important thing. If there's one potential clash inside his administration, you have some very, very, you know, high caliber people like Hillary Clinton and Tom Daschle inside his cabinet, but you also see a lot of people getting jobs inside the White House itself. People inside the White House tend to like to step upon what departments do and vice versa in Washington, so you'll probably see some clashes in the first few weeks.
And he's obviously surprised people on the left, too. Robert Gates in defense. Even Panetta surprised people as well. You mentioned a lot of people recognizing he didn't have direct intelligence agency experience. But some people said that was one of the reasons maybe he was picked. He has expressed his concern about torture and Guantanamo and, you know.
Well, there's that. And also, if you're Bill Clinton's chief of staff, you can certainly keep a secret.
One thing I wanted to ask, and Carla, I'll start with you on this. It's clear with his economic stimulus package that Obama desperately wants to get 80 votes in the U.S. Senate. And there seems to be a philosophical disagreement with some Democrats who believe just stick to the plan that we want, get to 60 votes, and it'll still pass. Obama really wants consensus, really wants... how is that going to play out?
I think this is going to be the real drama, and interesting drama. We already have seen the date move back where Nancy Pelosi was saying, hey, we want to deliver this by the time he takes office. Now she's into mid-February. I think, reality bites here. His speech this week talked about we need to act boldly and act now. But this is a big piece of legislation we're talking about. And, you know, Bill Clinton used to talk about building a bridge to the 21st century. This is not just the bridge. It's everything. It's schools. It's broadband. You listen to the speech this week. It had this glittering array of stuff. And, you know, Democrats are saying, hey, yeah, we want a lot of that. And the Republicans are saying, well, wait a minute, taxes.
Doesn't it also, though, foreshadow a little bit, he's using the bully pulpit before he even has taken it over to really try and coerce, pressure Congress into acting now. That's the sort of appeal that I would think has a broad appeal, because the perception people have is that Congress, talk about a do-nothing Congress. Yep. How long have we had a do-nothing Congress? He
did something which president-elects can do, which presidents cannot necessarily do, and that in his speech at George Mason, he really ran down the economy pretty hard. Talked about, you know, years of recession coming ahead, the worst maybe possibly being ahead, the kind of things which, if a president says, can drive the market down a couple hundred points. So he is pushing it very hard. I don't know if he's going to get 80 votes on this or not. If I were him, I'd be more realistic and go for 65 or 70. And the reason is because while Nancy Pelosi is smart and playing for time, the price is going higher and higher, and it's just simply going to be too much for a lot of Republicans to take.
Are the Republicans just going to have to choke it down for now, the idea that government spending is how we're going to get out of this mess?
Well, they don't have the votes to block it. They can try to filibuster it. That will fail. It'll fail spectacularly, I think. But I think what they can do is they can kind of try to make Obama and the Democrats dance and sweat a little bit. And so you go out and you do what Mitch McConnell's been doing, which he talks about, you know, we're not going to sign something which has mob museums in Las Vegas in it and water slides in Miami. In other words, just talk about the pork. And if I were the Republicans... Exactly. And if I were the Republicans, I'd probably go a step further and say, okay, if Governor Schwarzenegger wants $5 billion for California, he is more than welcome to fly to Washington on his own plane if he so chooses, and sit down and explain what the $5 billion is for. In other words, make all the governors dance through the hoops for the money.
How do you do that, though, and yet act with the kind of speed that's necessary. It seems that the toughest thing for Congress right now is this, this drumbeat out there, the desperation to get something done.
But they have to vet it somewhat because, Obama is in every respect the anti-Bush. I mean, he is eloquent where Bush is not. He is personally interesting and captivating, whereas Bush, sadly was not. But the one thing he does not want to be is George Bush in respect of signing bills that he has not read and frankly doesn't know what the hell is in there. 7,000-page spending documents that could have any kind of surprise in it. So I think Obama, for his own good, has to say that, look, we vetted this thing. Yeah.
But McConnell and other Republican leaders are saying, look, we want hearings on this. The question is, how do you get the expediency? This is an emergency situation and go through that whole process too. Isn't this going to be the dilemma here?
In that context, is this likely to be a long honeymoon? I mean, American society loves to build people up and then rapidly tear them down. The news media has a lot to do with that. Although everybody eagerly reads those things, so it's not like you're forcing food down people's throats, right. Or we are, I should say. So is he likely to have a longer one because there's something about him?
This is going to be so interesting to watch because we've never had a president, or at least not in in our lifetimes, that arrived with such adulation. You joked about being the Messiah and all, but he comes in with this 75% approval rating before he's even done anything.
Or maybe that's why.
Yeah. the reality is, look, the hourglass is quickly running out. He's going to have to take office and start making these harsh decisions, and that's when everything's going to hit the fan.
The other factor is how long he decides to go without really doing something polarizing. For example, of say gays in the military, if he decides to do that right away in office, as it rose with Clinton, things which quickly send people scattering their camps.
During the campaign, he talked about my first day in office. He talked about I'm going to end the war in Iraq. I think Guantanamo, closing Guantanamo. There were a lot of very polarizing things he talked about doing as soon as he got into office. Let's see if he delivers on those. I think that'll determine.
Bill, Carla, stay with us. We'll be right back, and we'll continue our discussion. Stay tuned.
Since the dawn of civilization, humans have sought knowledge and wisdom. The quest to answer the mystery of life is carried on for thousands of years.
But you can learn all the answers easily. Just watch these amazing high school students on Bay Area Quiz Kids. Each week, 2 teams from across the Bay Area compete for an incredible grand prize. Watch Bay Area Quiz Kids each Saturday at 2 p.m. on KRON.
Look around. Technology is everywhere.
It affects all of us, so it pays to know the latest high-tech trends.
At Tech Close-Up, we spot what's hot and what's not before you hear about it anywhere else.
We meet the folks who dream up these incredible innovations that change our lives.
We're coast to coast, covering the full scope of the high-tech world.
Plus, we make it understandable, and more importantly, we make it fun.
So stay on top of this fast-paced, high-tech world we live in.
Don't miss Tech Close-Up.
Because I have a doctor's appointment. Because I'll see if something's coming.
Because I've done it before. Because I can get out of the way in time.
Because is no excuse. Be smart. Be safe. Wait for the gate.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Bob Marks. We're talking about politics, so it must be Carla Marinucci of the Chronicle and Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution. We were talking a little bit about the atmosphere, the aura around Obama. How much is he capable of changing the way politics is done? We went through the Clinton years and the Bush years. Talk radio became a huge factor, and really polarized that the people at either end of the polls really dominated the discussion. That doesn't mean they necessarily dominated how things turned out, but they really drove the debate. How much can he change that dynamic?
Well, I think you got a reality check on that this week with the leak of the Panetta pick to head CIA. Nobody expected Dianne Feinstein to come as incoming head of intelligence, to come out and slam this as she did, saying that Panetta wasn't qualified. And Panetta, of course, in California, well-respected, integrity, etc., liked by an awful lot of people. This was a shock. Then Feinstein coupled it by turning around and going against the rest of the Democrats. The bottom line is, on the issue of Burris, the bottom line is, I think the lesson there was, Obama comes in, on a popular wave, Democrats are riding high, but there's also this, reality bites thing. He's got these very powerful people in the Senate and the House, and they're going to let him know it.
Once you win, you're so full of yourself. It's almost impossible for anybody to go without making a mistake. Are they showing signs of that too?
Well, yeah, I don't know. They slipped up on Dianne Feinstein. No question about that. It's a rookie mistake. We'll give them that one. Will Rogers famously said, I don't belong to an organized party. I'm a Democrat. And Obama might find that in some ways that trying to control all these various factions of his own party is kind of like herding kittens at time. But he is the man. He's truly the man in terms of running the country right now, and the only one with a mandate. Nancy Pelosi may think she has a mandate, but the public elected Barack Obama, not Nancy Pelosi. They didn't elect Nancy Pelosi's set of ideas. They elected what Barack Obama talked about, so he leads. I think in terms of changing politics, though, there's really one simple rule, and that's what happens when the man leaves the stage. And does the next person come along, try to imitate that person in terms of their style and what they do? Or is Obama just going to be an 8-year departure for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think with
all those Bush imitators that we're seeing all over the country.
There you go.
On the issue of Feinstein, maybe he didn't slip up, because I talked to Barbara Boxer this week. She said, well, I didn't get a call on the EPA either. She's, of course, the environment chair. Maybe Obama's kind of signaling, I'm going to do it my way. If so, some people cautioned he may have to be careful. Jimmy Carter came in with the same attitude.
The classic story is Bill Clinton. He comes to office and he sits down with Daniel Patrick Moynihan, then the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Moynihan has been advocating welfare reform for 30 years. His own party has wanted to tar and feather him for doing this. He's a heretic within the Democrats for doing this. Clinton is the first Democrat to win the presidency running a part on welfare reform. So if anything, Moynihan is just keyed up to here. We're going to do welfare reform. So I sit down. What does Clinton do saying? We're going out there with health care. completely alienates Moynihan in the process and makes health care just about impossible to sell in the Senate. You do have to push around your congressional colleagues. That's what Rahm Emanuel, the bad boy chief of staff, is there for. But that said, you do have to work with them because, they're the ones voting at the end of the day.
You do, but on the other hand, it seems to me that if Obama can position himself above the rest of the world, that politically, that's not a bad place to be. Obviously, the problems are so severe that if he has a foil in Congress and the Democrats, that may not be the worst thing in the world.
Well, but I think you just launched on the key word there, and that is foil. George Bush is leaving the stage very soon, and with Bush gone, the Democrats lack a real big foil in terms of who the bad person is, who the enemy is, and Obama himself does. And I just have this theory that one thing that drives most American politicians is the ability to latch onto a foil. Whether it is the other party, if it's a union, if it's some sort of bad lobby, what have you. And so Obama, I think, in his first 100 days in office, in part has to find the foil.
How much difficulty does the Senate have asserting itself when it can't seem to control its own ranks? I mean, you've got this whole debate over whether or not Blagojevich in Illinois can appoint this guy, whether they're going to seat him. You've got Mr. Landslide himself, Al Franken, coming in, and there's very much a cloud over his seat.
Senator Kennedy.
Senator Kennedy.
Caroline Kennedy.
And so there is some, they're busy having trouble keeping their own house in order. That's not accruing at all to their benefit. Is this just an incredible sideshow, or is this something that they're ultimately going to sort out?
I think all of them recognize the #1 issue. We're back to the same theme that Bill Clinton faced. It's the economy, stupid. Again, they understand that when it comes to, when we're talking about in California, the jobless rate hovering around 9% now. I mean, this is something all of them know, their own political lives. If they know anything, if they have any survival instinct, they know that's what it's going to come down to. If they can solve this thing, or at least give people some sense that there's been action on it. Fighting him and playing the political games, I don't think the public has a stomach for that at this point. Maybe later, but not now.
Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about California since you brought it up. We are seeing this just it seems like it's a movie, Groundhog Day. We've been watching it, but it just gets worse and bigger and bigger. And it seems like, as of today, they're lost. They just don't know what to do.
Arnold Schwarzenegger with the budget, this situation, you're looking back at the recall, and I think who would have believed, that he would have been really such a failure on the political sense. The guy is still a great showman, no question about it. But when you're talking about cutting California school days, 5 days, this is the first time in history. You're talking about doing some very draconian, drastic things. All because Schwarzenegger has never been able to get a handle on the politics up there in Sacramento.
Deliver his own party.
Cannot deliver his own party. Why? Republicans are saying, why should they go out on a limb for the guy when the ones who did, Abel Maldonado, Bruce McPherson, were never backed up by Schwarzenegger. They don't feel like they have any loyalty to the guy, and he has not tried to bring them along. Am I right?
Yeah, it is a really a story almost for another show because it takes more than a few minutes to explain. But Republicans have a lot of antipathy toward Arnold because they feel that Arnold's not with them. And part of it is just the fact that Arnold ideologically is not really a conservative Republican, but also because Arnold's never engaged in party building exercises. He has not backed up candidates in elections, and they're bitter about that. But on a different level, Gulliver went to the Lilliputians, and Lilliputians have managed to tie him down very well, and he's bogged down in Sacramento. I think this is the downside of bringing in a real complete outsider to being governor of California, and that there are virtues to it in terms of he's ideologically very flexible, which I think most Californians respond to very well. They like a guy who's conservative on some things, not so on others. On the other hand, he doesn't necessarily know how to drive the legislative process, and you see this every year with the budget, where he just sort of gets kind of sucked along like a riptide with the budget and can't really drive the process the way he should be.
I guess the best part of this conversation is that none of us are responsible for resolving this issue, but it does look like cutting the vehicle license fee was a huge fiscal mistake, because if you go back and start compounding the money it was going to bring in,
blew a hole in the budget that has never been able to, And now you've got Republicans up there with a proposed $14 billion in new taxes. You've got Republicans saying, no way, no how. He's proposing, increased sales tax. He's proposing cutting the income tax, dependent care. I mean, this is the kind of stuff. It's a disaster in so many ways.
It is. The flip side of that argument, though, is that while he did put a hole in the budget also has grown about 25% under his watch in only 5 years. So he's only too happy to sign bills that he frankly should be trying to cut back on. So, there are a lot of people out there who want to be governor in 2010, and I think they have a couple interesting challenges ahead of them. Number one is to figure out how exactly to drive the California economy, which is a mess right now, and then secondly, how to run as a candidate vis-a-vis how Arnold ran in 2003 and 2006.
How does this thing get fixed? I mean, presumably at some point we're going to have just a catastrophic problem. We seem to be able to shuffle
IOUs
things.
coming at the end of November.
And so, where is the end game here? I understand where all their positions are, but ultimately you got to deal with the situation, or everything just falls apart.
He's got to peel off those couple of Republicans that he needs to get this passed. Maybe the Democrats.
He'll get them.
And maybe the Democrats can shimmy through, more fee increases rather than tax increases.
Let's talk for a second about who might run for governor. And there's a secondary question, which is, why would you want to at this point? And I'm serious. They must be thinking, the world's a mess, I can fix this. So who's going to run? We've got Meg.
Who isn't going to run?
Well, you and I are not going to run.
That's
I think that's safe to say. Bill, I'm not sold on. But
funny you should mention.
Yeah, I want to be treasurer if that's the case. So who are the key Democrats? Who are the key Republicans that are looking at running?
Well, key Democrats heading the pack: Jerry Brown, Attorney General, who's made himself a hero of the gay and lesbian community recently on the issue of Prop 8. But he's got an interesting long history there, and
his father and grandfather were governor.
Of course, can run for a third term because he was governor before term limits passed. San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom, potentially Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, potentially former Controller Steve Wesley. Representative Loretta Sanchez is taking out papers. Come on down. That's
all. We're running out of time, but tell us about the Republicans.
3 right now to look at. Steve Poizner, the insurance commissioner. Meg Whitman, the former chairman of eBay, who stepped down from 3 boards to clear her way to run for governor, and Tom Campbell, a former congressman and state senator. And what they have in common, it's interesting. First of all 3 are presumed to be rather moderate. All 3 live in the 408 area code, so there's no Southern California conservative in the mix right now. And then thirdly, all 3, either through business or Campbell is an economics and law professor, they're all kind of economics mavens.
Yep. Bill, Carla, we have a lot to see in 2009. We'll see you back soon. Mark and I will be right back with some final thoughts. Stay with us.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage. If you live on the peninsula, there's only one place to get the latest news on business, sports, politics, education, and your community. Peninsula TV, Channel 26, the Peninsula and South Bay's Emmy Award-winning programming resource. For more information or for a programming schedule, go to pentv.tv or call us at 650-637-1936. Peninsula TV, your community programming channel.
Welcome back to the game. Mark Simon, Bob Marks, still. I don't want to lose the, we haven't even had the afterglow yet of inauguration, but it really is an historic moment. But it's a time of such serious trouble. I mean, on the economic scale, it's hard to imagine. I mean, I didn't live through the Depression, my parents did, but it left an imprint on them the rest of their lives. Turmoil and conflict and danger everywhere. The good news is, historically, if you look at the 200-plus years of history of this country, extraordinary people have risen during extraordinary times. And I guess that's part of what's so special about the inauguration is that we're hoping he's an extraordinary man for extraordinary times.
Yeah, I tend to look at it that way. You know, if you look back over this trajectory, amazing trajectory he's had, he always seems to rise to the occasion. And, you know, I think that there's a real opportunity here. There's an opportunity to fundamentally kind of remake the direction of this country, remake our position around the world, and to deal with some of the political paralysis that we've had. It's a tall order, but I think he's well positioned to be able to do that. And a lot of it comes down to just his ability to keep moving forward day in and day out and to communicate directly with the American people.
And to articulate what's on their minds. What he's really good at is putting into words how people feel about things, addressing their fears, addressing their hopes. And that's a huge part of it. Something Bill said that I thought was very telling is you look at how he influences the next generation of politicians. And the last person who did that was Reagan. Yep. Nobody since then really spawned imitators. He probably will. Yep. That's all we have time for.
I'm Bob Marks.
And I'm Mark Simon. Thanks for being with us, and join us next time on The Game.